Welcome to Standards Michigan's Federal and State Legislation Monthly Teleconference. Today we will be looking first at a standard regarding Legionnaire's disease, and then we will go over our agenda of federal legislation standard items. Today we have Mike Anthony with University of Michigan, also Larry Eagle-Vogel in Philadelphia.
Okay, great. Thanks, Christine. All right, let's get to this. We'll try to keep this down to a half an hour because it annoys our video guy when these get to be too long. So, Larry, I'll introduce you as someone who's very knowledgeable in the ASHRAE suite. You ran the 90.1 committee for many years, so you're close to the action. And since this one seems to have risen to the top of at least the public's eye, and also because whenever there's outbreaks of this nature, I believe that the federal government wants to get involved because the disease was, after all, named after a federal department. Is that about right?
No, it was named after the American Legion Convention in Philadelphia in 1976, where there was an outbreak and a whole bunch of people died.
Okay, yeah, I recall that. I thought I could get a little giggle out of that one. Evidently, my jokes are not doing very well today. So yeah, American Legion is not actually a government agency, but I do recall that original outbreak. And so you're a mechanical engineer, and what are the specifics? There are some specifics. We have some. We actually have done some work on this. Here you see the American Water Works Association. They're in on the action, of course. And let's see who else is in on the action. I think is there a Legionella magazine? Looks like there's a Legionella magazine. So why don't you just tell us what you know about this one, what your thoughts are, what you might recommend as a solution, and then of course maybe they can our listeners are able to talk to you offline separately. So any thoughts here, Larry?
Well, this is the first ANSI standard on this subject. There has been a guideline, but it's not ANSI approved. And it was published in June of this year, but no sooner was the ink dry when the committee met to put Band-Aids on the mess that they created. But looking at it from a bigger picture, it's my guess that maybe 0.1% of all the cooling towers out there have a problem each year. And the question is, because the requirements in this standard are so draconian, whether it's worth putting the burden on the economy for 99.9% of cooling towers to protect that fraction of 1% is questionable. And even if it was done on 100% of the cooling towers, would it really work? In other words, will it prevent or reduce the number of outbreaks of Legionnaire's disease? And there's no data to support that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because one of my pro forma comments on any standard is one which says, reminds the people who are writing the standards that there's not the only standard on earth. And particularly for operational people, we want some, I like to represent some due diligence to say, look, guys, everybody thinks their safe technology is important. We were at the elevator meeting in Michigan, Christine and I, a couple months ago. And those people think that really, next to the apocalypse, an elevator being down is the worst thing that could possibly happen. So this is what happens when well-meaning people forget the fact that there's other risks there. And I think what you just said kind of, it's not that it validates it, but how do you evaluate that risk in the context of all the other bad stuff that can happen in a hospital? That's a question. That I'm just putting it out there for discussion.
Responsible for the design of cooling tower systems and people responsible for operating cooling tower systems and some other minor, fountains and stuff like that, have a responsibility to periodically check to make sure that this is not a problem. But the requirements in the standard are so burdensome, to impose them on every cooling tower every year is is simply not justified.
Hmm. So what, for example, what do they want? Water samples, new piping every year? What are some of the more draconian specifics, prescriptive requirements do you have in mind?
They have to do specific evaluations and tests and treatment, which may or may not even be necessary in the first place. But the problem is that because it's an ANSI standard, it represents the standard of care. And even if you comply with it and there's an outbreak, that automatically deems you guilty. When I say you, I mean either the designer and or the operator.
That's right. Well, it becomes effective federal law because it's incorporated by reference. In the absence of any so-called competitor document, this will be part of an occupational safety as well as a federal. I mean, obviously, I made a joke earlier about it being part. It happened during a military, a convention of veterans. But it could happen as well in VA hospitals. It does strike me that this would be on the top of their agenda. And
it could happen in university hospitals, which is what you should be concerned about.
Right. I did invite my colleagues. We weren't very good about getting the notice out about this conference, but they know where we can find us. We're working more or less 24/7, 365 now, so there's no reason they can't come, and they know where we can be found. So what I'm seeing here is validation summary and monitoring schedule. And so as with all of these, how do you calibrate your risk? You've got high visibility risk. That's what our complaint is with the eyewash station. It's very similar. That why should be you spending millions of dollars on eyewash tests when it only affects 100 people per year, and half of those it was their own mistake. When there are so many systems that leave helpless people for no fault at risk for no fault of their own. So I get your point, and that's really one of our key drivers for doing what we do. We've got to balance.
But the issue, Mike, with Legionnaire's disease is that for eyewashes, you're only impacting the occupants of the building. Mm-hmm. With Legionnaire's disease, with cooling towers, you're impacting the public, and that's of much greater significance, and it violates the due diligence that engineers and operators are supposed to be applying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. I get that. So it doesn't really take a lot. An experienced standards guy knows what other standards guys will do. I often say a fisherman always knows another fisherman from afar. So here we are. I went on the word weekly, and here we are for small systems. Weekly cleaning, disinfection shall be required, or periodic use of an effective. So here we go. Why is it weekly? Why isn't it hourly? I mean,
or annually.
Or annually. Nobody knows that. So when my colleagues say, why do you look at stuff? Why do you look at standards in their early conception? It's because once you lay out a long document, this is not long by comparison, but still you put the larger the document, the fewer people are going to be able to look at it. And so here we have our old friend, the weekly test interval. And let's see, it looks like we lost Christine. So that let's look at monthly. Can we do anything by the month here? At least monthly, the testing of spa water for organisms. Okay. I'm not so sure that's not being done anyway right now. Let's see. Okay. So there we have it, guys. Now, this is Larry's opinion. Now, of course, how do you, as a professional engineer, assist an organization like the university or any university when they're faced with a lawsuit? What kind of information, what kind of support would you give in a court of law about nonconformity?
Well, first of all, from a designer standpoint, all existing buildings are grandfathered. And so this would only apply to designers for new buildings or major renovations. But it does apply to all building operators because they already have these things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So that's the first thing. In our imaginary court of law, you would say certain installations are grandfathered. Now, that's the product, but the actual operations and maintenance now, there might be some remediation. Remember the old PCB scare from a few decades ago, there was always what were thought to be compassionate compliance intervals, not too heavy a hand, not too light a hand, and we managed to change out a lot of transformers that really shouldn't have been there to begin with. So here I am saying, gee, we're a little concerned about new cost burden out of proportion to the risk, but I do recall when we were forced to change out transformers because of the PCB content, that it gave us an economic driver for getting some bad stuff out. So there's that characteristic. But your point is, many installations are already grandfathered as far as the way they're constructed. Is this largely an operations, or is this a construction standard? Is this operation or testing? Oh, it's prevention. Okay. Prevention.
And by the way, you're looking at the draft standard on the screen, not the final published approved standard.
Right. Well, I could buy that, but that's not the. Yeah, we can do that in a dedicated breakout. We're supposed to be ripping through a number of issues here, and we're almost halfway through. So, any thoughts on this? We wanted to get something out there right away to respond to this because it's likely it's on the nightly news. It'll be turned over to the feds in some way or another. And as engineers, as standards advocates, we'd like to condition our audience to some points of interest, and I'm sure that I'm hoping that we won't see any more of this, and we're offering standard solutions to some degree. But I'm not in the business of being an expert witness. But we know how the standards are developed, how the standards of care. Do they actually offer and say who developed this standard? You know, that's the other issue, is who's actually ASHRAE 188 committee. Does ASHRAE?
I have a list of those members, and unfortunately, too many of them have a self-interest in this issue because they sell products and services to implement what's required in the standard.
That's right. That's right. And we run into this all the time, of course. I see they're going to meet in Orlando. Okay. About 6 months from now, less than 6 months, they'll be out there. So my guess is that we don't have a user-owner final fiduciary. The guy who's got to pay for both the safety, he's got to be economically safe, right?
My guess, the guy who is at risk, namely the building owner in most cases.
That's right. And on your list there, how many people are on that committee? We don't have it. I could just go over your screen, but I'll take your word for it. How many people are actually on that committee?
Let me take a look. I have it here. There are probably about 24 voting members and another dozen participants.
Okay. And of the voting members, is anybody who's actually paying the bill among those votes?
I can't tell from what I can see right now.
And that's a problem with the ASHRAE suite. Their affiliations and the interest. This would be a larger issue I'd like to approach ASHRAE about. I understand there's difficulty in getting committee members if their interest category is exposed. I think there's some confidentiality there. So in a very gentle way, I know ASHRAE will probably be listening to this. Have a little look at your the way you categorize and identify your committee members. I'll put out NFPA as the standard of care for being equitable and fair and transparent about how your committees are constructed, and I'll just leave it at that. So
there is a huge appeal before ANSI right now over ASHRAE Standard 90.1 on the subject of the balance of interests of the voting members.
That's right, and it'd be nice to see ASHRAE do that themselves, just so others know. This is what due diligence. This is the standard of care when it comes to showing who's voting. And if I'll just pick one vote here, and I'll take the one I'm on. Here we are, 70. You can see here that there's, in fact, you'll even be able to see, because you're able to see more information than most people, that here I am identified as a user. Here's my email address. They know who I work for. This is a utility. This is an installer maintainer. Let's see, this is a user now. So IEEE. So this is what users look like. And these are not people who just bought the book. Okay? A user is not the person who just bought the book. It's somebody who actually, as I say, is a final fiduciary. So there we are. This is what I hope ASME and ASHRAE will work their way toward. I think they know this as well as I do. We need ASHRAE to be in business, but not quite like that. And we're running into this. We're running into this problem. So let us know how we can help you. You know, I'm doing my best to get the user owner a little bit more interested and focused on this. So with that, I think I kind of need to get off on that subject, Larry. If you have anything else, I'd like to start cutting into the other stuff that's come over there. Oh, look at this one. I'm sure you have some thoughts about this one. So we have what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Well,
6, 7.
Let me tell you what's going on the federal scene.
Okay, go ahead.
My perspective. One is that in the waning months of the Obama administration, both EPA and the Department of Energy are utilizing every possible tool available to them to implement the president's energy philosophy. The other issue that I see at the federal level is that the congressional committees, in particular the House Energy and Commerce Committee and the Senate Energy Committee, are putting together drafts of legislation to appease the lobbyists and contributors, such as the renewable energy industry and the conservation industry and the energy advocates. And so there was just released in the last week or so a bipartisan draft of energy legislation by the Senate Energy Committee, put together by the chair and the ranking member of that committee. And this proposed draft has several hundred pages, and it has what I characterize as everything for everybody, but not enough for most.
I like that. I always like to say bipartisan usually means some larger than usual conspiracy is involved. I think that there is a, when Christine, I think Christine did a search, and I think she muted herself.
No, I'm back.
Are you back? Yeah, I think, were you there online when we just typed in the word? We went to one.
I had a computer glitch, is what I had.
Okay. All right, a lot of that.
So I called. I'm back, though.
Okay, great. So if I get out of
here. I have it up on the screen now, what the Senate is doing. And I've read through that, and the most onerous thing in that proposal is that it directs the Secretary of Energy that if the government is not happy with what the private sector is doing, the government can tell the private sector what they have to do.
Well, we know there are restraints on that. We know when we have a couple circulars. We ought to draft a super circular like the financial people have that tries to remind some of these other agencies that there is a law that, in fact, that's what we talked about over here. That's why I always put this up here. This is Andy Updegrove giving us a more fully dimensioned understanding the National Technology Transfer and Advancement Act. And of course, that's conditioned and has some modifications. This is this OMB circular. Now, you know, if you want to talk about authority, I think you even mentioned authority. There's all kinds of back and forth going on about federal authority. Some people believe that the Office of Management and Budget really isn't a legitimate federal agency. Not legitimate. The executive branch is entitled to have any agency it wants. You know, a Kool-Aid stand oversight committee.
They have legislative authority. That's the question.
Yeah, and I think there's all kinds of battles going on. You get into Interstate Commerce Act, all that kind of happy horse ride. Long story short is that what I found, I did read the legislation. I found the usual suspects in there. I don't want to belabor it. We'll probably have a separate breakout on this one. We will be drafting something. And I think along the lines of, well, you only identify ASHRAE and IECC. So IECC is an ICC document, and an ICC document generally only has inspectors as the final voting authority. Now, their claim is that
that it is a consensus group, and it is not.
That's right. Now, I will tell you, Fred Grable, if you go back to our video blog here, to our home gamers, you'll see that Fred Grable, back in February, when we dealt with the National Technology Transfer Act the first time around, as he says, and I guess I'll show people here if I can get it. Where do I have it? It goes back to February. Long story short, their claim is, and they're good people over there, they're just trying to do a job like the rest of us. What is this, February? It goes back to February. I can get everybody mixed up. That the ICC process is endorsed by the Department of Energy as a consensus process. And I'll accept that that's their understanding of it. And those of us who are living in another world say that unless the public, a balance of interest, has votes, a balanced constituency of votes, not just building authority inspectors, as the final vote, that's not open in the same way that an NFPA document is, or an IEEE document. So that's our point. So I would say, and I'll mark it up, we'll mark it up and we'll draft a letter. We'll probably try to send something through our, it turns out was it Fred Upton over there? He's chairman of this particular committee, and we'll remind him
on the House side. They're developing their own separate draft law.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of money out there, right? As I started to say, Christine and I, we searched on the word energy, and I think we pulled out half the congressmen. And, it's because there's a trough of money there, and they all want to get a piece of it. So, that's how our lobbying system works. Remember, I'm saying all these things about the federal government, having many people, my friends, close friends, part of government. This is the large cultural issue that we run into our business. We have a very complicated relationship with government here. But as technical people, we understand that we already have existing laws that allow the best ideas to come from the work point up. I always call it work from the work point up. When it comes from the federal government down, you get all kinds of mischief making. You know this as well as I do. So, but some people like the mischief. Somebody else's mischief is bad, but your mischief is good. So that's what you run into. Okay. All right. So let's move on to what else do we have here. So these are competitor bills. We'll be watching them. It'll, I imagine. Do you think there's a chance that this stuff would actually get signed before the executive branch leaves office?
Something will probably get signed, but nothing like what you see so far in the drafts.
I see. Okay.
Because each house, the House and the Senate, have to do their own thing to appease their own supporters, and then even if they pass each respective house, they have to go into conference, which is where the deal-making really happens.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, Larry, I think that this is where we left our conference last month. I think we agreed that this legislation from the DOE was not a lot different than this one here, and I recall the endpoint. So is there any other state? Let's see what happened in the state and local legislation. State and local, what happened here? What have we done?
Well, there's quite a bit going on state and local, particularly with regard to renewable energy portfolios and how much of the electricity supply has to come from renewable sources. And some states are backing off on that or eliminating it. And the other issue is whether utility companies are required to provide rebates for predetermined conservation measures. So, for example, a lot of them give rebates for putting in more efficient lighting like LEDs, whether you even turn them on or not.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you want to name a state? Let me guess. I'm going to guess California, Massachusetts.
Indiana is a perfect example, who is cutting back on these things.
Indiana, give me a keyword here. Indiana, what should I look up here?
Renewable portfolio standard.
Renewable portfolio. Oh, it looks like I did look that up. I just didn't key it in. So here we go. State portfolios, National Council of Conference of State Legislatures. Okay. Christine, by the way, we were talking about this the other day. While that tries to generate itself, Al Taubman, and I believe it's at Harvard. Is this going to come up, or is this stuck? And it's not going to come up. So let's see if that generates. We're going to go over to the Taubman Center for State and Local Government. Taubman Center for State and Local Government at Harvard University. Here we are. Here we go.
There was another study just published, and I can send you some information on it.
Yeah.
Where they looked at low-income weatherization programs, and they took as a sample 30,000 houses. And I'm trying to remember whether it was Wisconsin or Michigan. I'll dig it up and send it to you. But what they found, that the investments that they made in improving the energy efficiency of these low-income houses never paid for itself, even after 15 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's market making. Yeah? Yeah, that's market.
That's a situation where the true believers and the energy efficiency advocates go out and lobby for all this money and spend thousands of dollars per house to save energy, and they never save it.
Well, okay, so we're saying the same thing in different ways. On a near daily basis now, we get proposals from ASHRAE to start monitoring new stuff. This is the era of we're on the front end of the Internet of everything, so everything has to be monitored and wired back wirelessly, or so we can monitor everything. Okay. I'm sure that'll, where this renewable energy thing is probably in its later stages, as typical for large economic bubbles. You get these boom and bust cycles. It's almost established orthodoxy that when you have these bubbles, economic bubbles, you're still left with a new industry. And that's just the price you pay. That's capitalism. So this renewable, I think some good will come out of the excess, but it is through the excess we must persevere. So that's kind of our time limit here. Larry, it's always fun talking to you. I love your insights, and I'm looking forward to next month. See what kind of things, maybe we can drill down a little bit more into state and local government beyond the state of Michigan. We don't have the resources right now. We do have people in California, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. That would be you, actually. Who else? In Massachusetts. But we don't have the resources to pull together. And it's my estimation that I'm not sure if we can do anything meaningful. I still have to focus at the laws, the federal law, national and international laws, from which a lot of state and local legislation is inspired. Anything else, Christine, you want to add? Want to close us out, maybe? No, maybe I'm putting you on the spot here. Any closing thoughts, closing reflections?
Just that, this is the era of streaming regulations, so we have to stay on it, and that's what we're doing by meeting monthly on this federal legislation.
Okay. Yeah, I hope you like our new word here.
We pass too many laws with unintended consequences.
Well, it's the lawmaking class, right? I like to turn them into engineers, but that's another teleconference. Hey, everybody, thanks very much. We'll see you on the other side. Okay? Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mike.
Very good. Take care. Have a good day.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.